Number 3, today I will be the Christ. Today I will be the Christ. I'm just trying to echo Paul here in Galatians chapter 2, verse 20, where he says, "For me to live is Christ." Okay, we have different talents, we have different abilities, but we all have the same basic ministry, and that is to show what Jesus would look like if he were in our particular situation. So my first task is to show my students what Jesus would look like if he were an eccentric, bearded, single theologian teaching at Abilene Christian University. That's my job. I tell my 18 and 19-year-olds they have a particularly important job. Their job is to show me what Jesus, the teenager, looks like. And I have a lot of curiosity about that and no information on Scripture. So the only evidence I'm going to get on what Jesus, the teenager, looked like are what my students show me. Don't y'all wonder about that? I mean, don't you parents wonder what it must have been like to raise a teenager who not only thought they were God, but who was? You know, I mean, don't you wonder about that? I did my very earliest growing up years at church in Springfield, Missouri, and my dad would often sit. My dad and mom would sit right at the front of the building on the inside aisle, about where you're sitting. And so at the end of the service, the preacher would always go to the back of the building to greet everybody as they were leaving. And as he was going back, he would often, I was about 3 years old, he would scoop me out of my father's arms, take me to the back with him, and then we would shake everybody's hands. And apparently this was incredibly cute. And so as families will, they decided that there was some deep connection between me and this preacher, even though, you know, after a while I couldn't have picked him out of a group of two. And they would send me bulletin articles he had written and all this, and I'd just throw them away. Who cares? But they sent me a newspaper article that meant a lot to me years later. He wound up his preaching career in a place called Branson, Missouri. It's hard to explain to Branson to people. The way I explain Branson to people in the United States is, think of some American singer you think is dead. Okay, they're not dead, they're in Branson. As he was finishing up his preaching life there, he was dying of Lou Gehrig's disease. My stepmother is currently dying of Lou Gehrig's disease, almost certainly will not live out the summer. And in Lou Gehrig's disease, your body just basically shuts down. You lose all ability to move. And at this point in his disease, he was preaching from a wheelchair, could no longer stand, really couldn't move his arms either. And one of the members of his church was quoted in the paper as saying, "For years he's been showing us how you live as a Christian. Now he's showing us how you die as one." And I thought, what wonderful ministry. He's doing the same thing he was always doing. He's saying, for me to live is Christ. And at the end of my life, I'll show you what Jesus would look like if he had a degenerative, uncurable disease. When I have a student in my office and we're having a conflict, and they're a Christian, we always have this conversation. I'll tell them, okay, what I need from you is I need you to help me understand what Jesus would do if he were sitting where I'm sitting. Because at the moment, I'm not feeling very Jesus-like towards you. And what I'm going to try to help you do is think about what Jesus would do if he were sitting where you're sitting. Because that's what we do. We show the Christ to people. Now, I want you to think about what happens when you put number 2 and number 3 together. If you're fully present to the other person and you're the Christ, guess what the other person experiences? The presence of Jesus in their life. Okay, number 4. I think number 4 is harder than number 3, but you'll decide for yourself. Number 4, today